Some artists are remembered for their paintings. Others are remembered for their lives. And then there is Filippo Lippi, a man whose life itself felt like a forbidden painting. He was a monk. He was a genius painter. He broke vows, broke rules, and broke every box society tried to place him in. His story begins not in luxury, not in palaces, but in loneliness. Filippo Lippi was born in Florence, and very early life took everything from him. His father died. His mother disappeared. He was left with no family, no protection, just the city and the streets. So they took him to a monastery, stone walls, cold mornings, prayers instead of childhood. He was supposed to become a quiet monk, to obey, to disappear into routine. But inside that boy, something refused to be silent. While others read scriptures, Filippo watched the light on the wall. While others memorized prayers, he traced shadows with his finger. He did not see walls. He saw stories trapped in stone, asking to be released. The monastery wanted discipline. Filippo wanted colors. He discovered that when he held a brush, the world obeyed him. He could make saints smile. He could make angels human. He could make silence speak. Florence outside was changing. The Renaissance had begun. A new idea was rising. The human being matters. Artists like Giotto and Masaccio showed that holiness could live inside real faces, real bodies, real emotions. Filippo Lippi watched their work and thought, saints are not statues. They feel, they doubt, they love. And he decided to paint them that way, not as distant icons, but as people. His Madonnas didn't just look holy, they looked alive. Soft smiles, warm eyes, almost breathing. For the first time, the Mother of God looked like an actual mother, tender, worried, loving. But the most shocking part of his life was still ahead, because in a world of strict rules, vows, and sacred silence, Filippo Lippi did something unthinkable. He fell in love, not just with anyone, but with a nun. Her name was Lucrezia Butti. She had taken vows. He had taken vows. They were both bound by the church, and yet bound even more strongly by each other. What began as a model for a painting became a love story that shook Florence. They escaped together. They had a child together, who would also become a great painter. They faced scandal, judgment, and even the Pope. Filippo Lippi lived dangerously close to sin and miracle at the same time. He proved one thing. Art is not born from perfect lives. It is born from lives that burn. This is not just the story of a painter. It is the story of an orphan who refused to disappear, a monk who refused to stay silent, a lover who refused to deny his heart, an artist who painted saints as humans and humans as something sacred. Stay with me, because the life of Filippo Lippi is not a biography. It is a confession, written in color. Filippo Lippi did not enter art through privilege, academies, or royal patronage. He entered it through walls. Inside the monastery where he grew up, art was not entertainment. It was prayer carved into color. The walls were covered with faded frescoes, cracked by time, yet alive. While other monks walked past them without noticing, young Filippo stopped, stared, and listened. He realized something important very early. Images could speak where words remained silent. He found himself drawn more to pigments than to scriptures. When he watched older monks grinding minerals into powder, ultramarine from precious lapis lazuli, red from cinnabar, green from copper, it felt like alchemy. Colors came from stone, from earth, from the world itself, and were transformed into visions. He learned secretly at first. He copied the lines he saw on the walls. He traced saints' faces with his finger in the air. And then one day, someone placed a brush in his hand. It was as if the world opened. For Lippi, painting was not decoration. It was a way to understand life. He began to see light and shadow not just as physical phenomena, but as emotions. Sorrow falling across a face, hope shining through a window. The monastery that tried to confine him had unintentionally given him the greatest gift: time to look deeply. Florence outside those walls was becoming the center of a revolution, the Renaissance. Artists such as Giotto and later Masaccio were breaking with stiff medieval traditions. Figures in paintings began to breathe, bend, occupy space, and feel. Perspective appeared. Bodies had weight. Humanity returned to sacred images. When Filippo first saw Masaccio's frescoes, it changed him forever. Here were saints who were no longer flat symbols. They had muscles, shadows, doubts, and humanity. Lippi stood before those frescoes in silence and thought, this is the truth. Holiness is human. He wanted to follow that path, not to deny spirituality, but to root it in life. He officially trained as a painter after taking monastic vows, but in reality, his true teachers were walls, light, and human faces. He watched people closely, children playing in streets, merchants arguing, women carrying baskets, and he stored every gesture in memory. Later, those gestures returned in his saints, in his angels, in his Madonnas. He developed a gift that would define him. He could depict tenderness. Where others focused on grandeur or strict solemnity, Lippi captured the delicate moment between mother and child, the hint of a smile on the lips of a Madonna, the softness of hands resting in prayer. For him, art was not distant. It was intimate. Patrons began to notice. Whispers spread through Florence. There is a monk who paints emotion. Commissions followed. Churches asked him to paint altar pieces. Wealthy families wanted private devotional works. But what they received was not what they expected. They expected icons. He delivered humanity. His angels looked young, curious, even mischievous. His Virgin Marys were not unreachable queens, but real women, with warmth in their eyes and the quiet fatigue of motherhood. It shocked some viewers, but it moved many more. Filippo Lippi was now walking fully into the world of art, not as a decorator of religion, but as an interpreter of the human soul. This journey into art also awakened something else: independence. The more he painted, the less he fit the rigid mold of monastery life. His brush led him beyond rules, beyond walls, toward a world where passion, beauty, doubt, desire, and faith all existed together on one canvas. His path into art was not straight. It was not obedient. It was alive. And from this living energy would soon come the greatest scandal, a love story that would change his fate and inspire some of the most tender paintings of the Renaissance. But before that, he had already made one thing clear. Filippo Lippi would paint the sacred by painting what is most deeply human. Who was Filippo Lippi? To answer that, we must imagine a man who never fit inside the boundaries drawn for him, not by society, not by the church, not even by art itself. Filippo Lippi was born in Florence around 1406 during the early Renaissance, a time when the world was beginning to rediscover the power of human thought, human beauty, and human emotion. But his life did not begin with privilege or comfort. He was orphaned at a young age. His father died, his mother disappeared, and he was placed in a Carmelite monastery. The monastery was supposed to shape him into a quiet monk. Instead, it became the place where his rebellion and his genius was born. Inside those stone walls, Filippo discovered painting. He watched sunlight falling across frescoes, saints with cracked halos, colors faded yet alive. While others prayed, he studied faces. While others memorized scripture, he memorized light and shadow. He didn't see icons, he saw people hidden behind them. From the beginning, Filippo Lippi understood something essential. Holiness and humanity are not opposites. He officially became a monk, but his true calling was painting. Inspired by masters like Masaccio, he embraced a new vision of art, one where sacred figures were not cold symbols, but living beings who breathed, doubted, loved, and felt. His talent quickly became undeniable. Unlike many painters of his time, Filippo Lippi did not focus on grandeur or rigid solemnity. He captured tenderness, the softness of a mother's gaze, the shy smile of a child, the fragile beauty of youth. His Madonnas were not distant queens. They were real women, warm and emotional. His angels looked playful, curious, sometimes almost mischievous, like real children pretending to be divine. This is why viewers were moved. His paintings did not preach, they felt. But Lippi was not simply a painter. He was also a man of intense emotions and restless spirit. His life was filled with movement, controversy, and passion. He broke rules the monastery expected him to keep. He loved freedom, laughter, wine, conversation, And most of all, he loved love. The greatest scandal of his life proved it. While working on a commission, he met a young nun named Lucrezia Butti. She became his model for the Virgin Mary, and then she became the love of his life. They were both bound by vows, yet they chose each other. They escaped together, had a son, Filippo Lippi, who later became a renowned painter himself. Their relationship shocked Florence, angered church authorities, and even reached the Pope. And yet the same Pope eventually granted Lippi release from his vows, recognizing his talent and perhaps understanding that some souls cannot be contained by walls. Filippo Lippi continued to create works that shaped the Renaissance. His style influenced artists such as Sandro Botticelli, who was actually his pupil. Through Lippi, Renaissance painting grew more human, more emotional, more intimate. He died in 1469 in Spoleto, where his last works still remain. But his real legacy is not just in churches or museums. It is in the way we now expect sacred art to have human feeling. The way we expect faces to tell stories rather than just follow rules. So who was Filippo Lippi? He was an orphan who found family in color, a monk who refused to silence his heart, a lover who chose passion over rules, and artist who made saints human and humans almost sacred. He was a reminder that art does not come from perfection. Art comes from people who dare to live. And Filippo Lippi lived, fully, dangerously, beautifully, and left behind paintings that still breathe centuries later. Every great love story is called forbidden by someone. For Filippo Lippi, love was not simply an emotion. It was a force powerful enough to break vows, challenge the church, and change the course of his life forever. He had already become known as the monk who painted tenderness. He could give angels the faces of real children and Madonnas the eyes of living women. But one day, the boundary between model and miracle disappeared. Her name was Lucrezia Butti. She was a young nun in a nearby convent, quiet, graceful, with a face that seemed carved out of light. Filippo first saw her not as a scandal, but as a vision. He asked for permission for her to sit as a model for the Virgin Mary in one of his works. What began as art became destiny. While she sat for him, he watched how light touched her features, the softness of her smile, the sadness hidden behind her calm expression. As days passed, the line between sacred image and living woman blurred. Filippo realized something dangerous. He was no longer painting a symbol. He was painting someone he loved. And Lucrezia, who had taken vows of silence and obedience, discovered within herself a feeling she had never been allowed to name. They were both bound by rules. He as a monk, she as a nun. The church had defined their futures before they were even old enough to understand them. Yet their hearts refused to obey what their signatures had promised. Their meetings were quiet. There was no drama, no music, only whispered conversations, shared glances, and the terrifying joy of being seen completely by another human being. Florence, however, was not blind. Rumors spread, a monk and a nun, speaking too long, looking too softly, disappearing too often. When Lucrezia disappeared from the convent, scandal erupted like a storm. Filippo had taken her away. To many it was sin, to others it was madness. To them, it was simply truth. They fled not into legends but into ordinary rooms, small streets, borrowed spaces, any place where they could live without pretending. Together they had a child, Filippo Lippi. He would later become one of the great painters of the Renaissance, a living proof that even forbidden love can create beauty that the world is forced to remember. The church intervened. Punishments were considered. Their case reached all the way to the Pope. And then something unexpected happened. Instead of destroying them, the Pope chose to recognize what every painting by Filippo Lippi already confessed. This was not corruption. This was a heart refusing to lie. Filippo was released from his vows. He was permitted to live with Lucrezia openly. Their life was never easy. They faced judgment, gossip, moral lectures, and the cold eyes of those who believe rules are more important than people. But they also shared laughter, arguments, art, and love that had no need to hide anymore. In his later paintings, something changed. The Madonnas became more human than ever. Their smiles softened. Their eyes held secrets of love, loss, risk, and courage. Viewers felt something they could not explain. The Virgin no longer looked like an unreachable queen. She looked like a woman who had loved deeply and paid the price for it. That was Lucrezia. And through her, Filippo discovered the ultimate truth of his art. Holiness is not the absence of human feeling. Holiness is love, even when the world forbids it. Filippo Lippi's forbidden love did not ruin him. It completed him. It turned a monk into a man into a lover, and a lover into the painter whose works still breathe today. Because sometimes the greatest miracles are not in churches or heavens. Sometimes the miracle is simply this: two people who choose each other, despite everything built to keep them apart. What made Filippo Lippi different was not only what he painted, but how his paintings felt. In an age when many artists still showed saints as distant icons, frozen in perfection, Filippo Lippi did something revolutionary. He gave holiness a human face. His power was tenderness. In his Madonnas, you do not just see a religious symbol. You see a mother trying not to cry, smiling softly at her child, tired and loving at the same time. You see hands that actually touch, bodies that carry weight, eyes that hold secrets. His figures are not trapped in gold backgrounds. They exist in light, in shadow, in air. He brought emotion into sacred art. Lippi understood that faith is not made only of rules and rituals. Faith is also made of fear, hope, love, doubt, longing, and he placed all of these onto the faces he painted. One of his greatest strengths was how he painted children. His angels do not look like perfect marble statues. They look like real boys, playful, curious, sometimes slightly mischievous, as if they might laugh in the next second. Through them, he reminded viewers that innocence is alive, moving, joyful, not stiff and silent. Technically, his art was powerful as well. He mastered soft modeling of faces with light, delicate skin tones, graceful lines of hands and veils, gentle transitions between shadow and brightness. His figures seemed to glow from within, as if light is not only touching them from the outside, but rising through them. But the real strength of his art came from his life. He loved deeply, he suffered, he broke rules and paid the price. All those storms did not destroy his paintings. They filled them with truth. When Filippo Lippi painted the Virgin Mary, he was not imagining an unreachable queen in heaven. He was remembering the women he had known, women who had loved, waited, worried, raised children, and faced judgment. This is why his Madonnas feel so real. They are painted with empathy, not distance. His influence did not end with him. His student would become one of the greatest artists of the Renaissance, Sandro Botticelli. Through Botticelli, Lippi's tenderness and lyrical line traveled into the future. Even today, when we look at his works, something unexpected happens. We do not simply analyze composition or color. We recognize ourselves. We see our fears in the eyes of angels, our hopes in the gaze of Madonnas, our own humanity in the stories of saints. This is the real power of Filippo Lippi's art. He reunited the sacred and the human. He proved that divinity is not far away in the clouds. It is hidden in faces, in small gestures, in love, in the fragile beauty of everyday life. Centuries have passed, cities have changed, but his paintings still breathe, because they are not just images. They are feelings made visible.